Super Tuesday is in full swing today. Voting is underway across the country as the remaining 2020 candidates fight for the Democratic nomination. Former Vice President Joe Biden won key endorsements from three former candidates, Pete Buttigieg, Senator Amy Klobuchar, and Beto O'Rourke. They joined him yesterday, urging their supporters to vote for the former Veep.
However, as moderates unite behind Joe Biden, Senator Bernie Sanders continues surging in the polls. More than 1,300 delegates are up for grabs today, with California and Texas holding the highest number. Ed O'Keefe is following the race in Arlington, Virginia.
Those big endorsements overnight are a sign that at least some moderates in the Democratic Party are now coalescing behind Biden as he desperately tries to catch the frontrunner in the race, Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders.
We are better than this president, and so get up! Let's take back this country.
Former Vice President Joe Biden is riding into Super Tuesday on a fresh wave of support.
I'm delighted to endorse and support Joe Biden for president.
Three of his former rivals, Pete Buttigieg, Amy Klobuchar, and Beto O'Rourke, made last-minute endorsements before today's critical votes.
If you are tired of the extremes, you have a home with me. And I think you have a home with Joe Biden.
They all argued that Biden has the best shot at defeating President Trump.
We have someone who, in fact, is the antithesis of Donald Trump.
At a dueling rally, Senator Bernie Sanders spoke in Minnesota, Senator Klobuchar's home state, where he extended an olive branch.
To all of Amy and Pete's millions of supporters, the door is open. Come on in.
But also acknowledged the moves to stop him.
It's not just the corporate establishment that's getting nervous. The political establishment is getting nervous.
But this is not a two-man race. Sanders and Biden still face three other opponents this Super Tuesday. Massachusetts Senator Elizabeth Warren has failed so far to win a state, but is vowing to stay in the race.
We're looking forward to gaining as many delegates as we can tomorrow, especially from the great state of California.
And today we'll find out if former New York Mayor Michael Bloomberg's unorthodox approach of focusing first on Super Tuesday states and spending more than $500 million will pay off.
I'm in it to win it, and we are going to go out and we're going to go get them.
An estimated 15 million people are expected to vote across the country today on this Super Tuesday. At this polling site in Virginia, a good day would bring in about 1,700 votes. But for those that have cast ballots early and maybe chose one of those candidates who dropped out, they're kind of out of luck at this point. Already 3.5 million early ballots have been submitted in California. Those folks have no choice at this point if they voted for somebody like Klobuchar or Buttigieg. Anne-Marie and Vlad?
All right, Ed, thank you. So for more on this, we want to bring in CBSN political reporter Caitlin Huey-Burns. She's following the latest in Houston, Texas, one of the Super Tuesday states, one of the Super Tuesday states. I know, really. So, Caitlin, let's talk a little bit about Senator Bernie Sanders. You know, he continues to poll rather high in many polls in different states. Is it too late for moderates to, who seem to be sort of rallying around Biden, at least the ones that dropped out, seem to be rallying around Biden? Is it too late for them to sort of come together and become a viable competition for Bernie Sanders?
Hi, good morning, Vlad and Anne-Marie. We are outside a polling location in Houston, Texas. Can you tell there's an election today? But that is the big question heading into today is, can this support that Joe Biden has garnered over the past 24 hours, those big endorsements from former rivals like Pete Buttigieg, Amy Klobuchar, even Beto O'Rourke made an appearance in Dallas last night to support the former vice president. Does that coalescing represent a larger movement by the party to get behind Joe Biden to be able to take on Bernie Sanders? Bernie Sanders really wants to flip the narrative again tonight. He's poised to do very well in California, where he's built up a ground organization specifically geared towards Latino voters. We know that he's done well among that constituency in Nevada. He's also competing here in Texas, trying to gain traction, and is doing well on the ground as well. We'll see what those returns look like. But that is really the battle kind of going into Super Tuesday, is the Joe Biden wing of the party kind of versus Bernie Sanders. Of course, Elizabeth Warren is still in this race. She was campaigning in California last night, trying to gain traction on Super Tuesday. Remember, as candidates have fallen behind expectations in the earlier states, they've been pointing to Super Tuesday as a way to gain back any momentum or to at least show a big return on the investments that they made, whether it's Michael Bloomberg spending a lot of money, Elizabeth Warren with an extensive ground operation, Bernie Sanders and Joe Biden. All of those candidates to watch tonight, and Texas is right in the middle of it.
And there is a moderate X factor that hasn't been on the ballot before. It's Bloomberg. I mean, what sort of impact could Bloomberg have on this? Could he split the moderate vote?
Right.
Like, who knows, right?
You know, the biggest question before Bloomberg got onto the debate stages were, would he give Joe Biden a run for his money, or at least use his money to really kind of put down Joe Biden? And we've seen the debates really have an impact on this race. I mean, we've seen that early on in terms of the polling thresholds and the donor thresholds needed to make the debate stage. Well, when they did away with the donor requirement and Michael Bloomberg got to appear on the debate stage for the first time, it kind of pulled back the curtain a little bit on his campaign. He's been spending money on air, see his ads everywhere online. He has a big operation as well. But those debates, I think, since his appearances on those two stages, he's since, dropped in polls. Joe Biden has since risen, coming off that big win in South Carolina, which was a real crystallizing moment, I think, for many Democrats in this race, that Joe Biden had proven to have a broad constituency, a good, strong base among African-American voters. And so what does that do to Michael Bloomberg? I think this is, in the previous races, we've always talked about the man not on the ballot. Well, Michael Bloomberg is on the ballot in Super Tuesday. They've gambled it all on today. He has vowed to stay in beyond this, but this is a real test for whether Mike Bloomberg can pull any kind of delegates.
Caitlin, let me ask you about former Vice President Joe Biden. There was a really moving moment yesterday when the former Vice President, talked about Pete Buttigieg and how much he reminded him of his son Beau, and you asked him about that sentiment. I want to play some of that.
He and Beau have the same. I think they're both principled people. They both volunteered to go to Afghanistan in his case, and Iraq in my son's case. My son was Attorney General. But I found Beau, you might expect me to say this, but they're similar in their age and their circumstance, but well, maybe I should just leave it at that.
You talk often about your son and his service, and we're grateful for that. Do you ever have any regrets about not having served in the military?
Sometimes I do, and but there wasn't to be, and but my son, anyway, I have great respect for what my son did, and I have great respect for my living son as well as my daughter.
And he was very much the same when he was talking to his supporters, Caitlin, with Pete Buttigieg standing behind him there. And you could see the former mayor you could see in his eyes that there was at least a misting of his eyes as he listened to the former vice president. How did these endorsements from Mayor Pete, from Senator Klobuchar and Beto O'Rourke impact his campaign? And more importantly, I guess, the way that Joe Biden talks to the people and to his supporters, how much will that factor into making a decision today?
Yeah, an emotional Joe Biden in that interview, and an emotional Joe Biden getting the endorsement from Pete Buttigieg. He talks often about his son on the campaign trail, often saying that he was the one that may have run for president. Joe Biden talks a lot about his family, and he makes these really emotional connections with people. You've seen him at rallies, you've seen him in town halls, but when he's on that rope line talking to people, you can sense that deep affection that people have for him, and I think that interview kind of spoke to that. I think when it comes to whether these endorsements will make a difference for Joe Biden, there's a couple of things to consider. Early voting has been well underway here in Texas and California. Lots and lots of ballots to the tune of about 1 million have already been cast. that was when Pete Buttigieg was still in the race. That's when Amy Klobuchar was still in the race. So to the extent that this could help those undecided voters or those who are making decisions today, actually in a polling place right behind me, does that move voters to Joe Biden? I think the biggest thing that it did, though, is give Joe Biden one of the best media days of his political campaign this cycle. We've been talking a lot about how he's been lacking in fundraising, that he hasn't been able to compete with the money, the grassroots money coming in for a candidate like Bernie Sanders. I think yesterday he kind of showed an ability to garner momentum by using free media. He had that well-designed rally last night that looked, that kind of kept everybody looking at the Biden campaign, something that we haven't really seen before. 3 former candidates quickly endorsing Joe Biden and signaling to the rest of the party that they want this field to narrow down and narrow down quickly in order to defeat Donald Trump, which is, of course, what Democrats' main goal is. So that was a real moment for the campaign yesterday. Whether that translates into votes on the ground, we'll see today. And the big question I have is, how long does that last? Does that give him enough heading into the later contest, or does Bernie Sanders change the narrative yet again tonight?
All right, Caitlin, thank you so much. A reminder, CBSN will have coverage of the Super Tuesday contest starting before polls close tonight. You can stream Red and Blue starting at 5 p.m. Eastern.